Aloha mai kako. You are watching Hawaii Political Reporter.
There's a lot going on in the world right now with the Bo Bergdog show, the ongoing Moncton, Canada shooter situation, which is a bizarre one. There's the Tiananmen anniversary, Obama in Poland, a new boss in Egypt, and so much more. And I just want to say from the outset here, you can always stay up to date by following our respective Twitter accounts at Corbett Report and at Media Monarchy, or, of course, by subscribing to our RSS feeds, all of which and so much more can be found at newworldnextweek.com. James, let's get right into it with a story from the Associated Press and posted to my own geopolitics site. Hunger Games salute used as protest in Thailand. The three-finger salute from the Hollywood movie The Hunger Games is being used as a real symbol of resistance in Thailand. Protesters against the military coup are flashing the gesture as a silent act of rebellion, and they're being threatened with arrest if they ignore warnings to stop. Thailand's military rulers say they were monitoring the new form of opposition to the coup. Reporters witnessed the phenomenon, and individuals were captured on film making the raised arm salute. The gesture emerged over last weekend as protesters joined small flash mobs or even stood alone, flashing three fingers in the air. A spokesman for the junta told the Associated Press, quote, "We know it comes from the movie, and let's say it represents resistance against the authorities. If a single individual raises three fingers in the air, we are not going to arrest him or her. But if it is a political gathering of five or more people, then we will have to take some action. If it persists, then we will have to make an arrest," end quote. In the Hunger Games movie and book trilogy, the salute symbolizes rebellion against totalitarian rule, signifying thanks, admiration, and goodbye to a loved one. But Thai protesters gave varying explanations. Some cited the French Revolution's trinity of values, liberty, equality, fraternity, and others said it means freedom, election, and democracy. While the strife imitating art nature of the phenomenon is extraordinary, it is not unprecedented. Other interesting pop culture examples of symbols being used to express political sentiment include Occupy protesters, of course, wearing the Guy Fawkes mask from the V for Vendetta comic book and movie. The practice of tying a yellow ribbon as a symbol of support for hostages, missing soldiers, or prisoners was popularized in part by the song "Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree" that topped the charts in 1973, referring to the Iranian hostage crisis and the Philippines People Power Revolution, both in the 1980s. Now, James, a spokesman, of course, for Hunger Games distributor Lionsgate said the company was aware of the Thai protest but had no comment. So we've talked about something like this on Ground Zero this week. This is a different animal, but James, it's still on that level of sort of life imitating low art. What is your take?
Well, yeah, there are a couple of interesting things to take away from this, not least of which the predictive programming aspects of this and how, yeah, Hollywood flicks feed into, that are based on books, feed into revolutions taking place halfway around the world. It is a bizarre tie-in, and I think there's more to be said about that, but for my money, this is an interesting phenomenon insofar as it represents probably the perfect example of that old idea that sometimes the reaction to tyranny can be worse than the tyranny itself, or at least as bad. Certainly, yay, they got rid of Shinawatra's sister, the puppet, foreign-funded, lobbyist-controlled Shinawatra family has been ousted from Thailand, yay. And now there's a military junta that's delaying democracy for another year. They're going to delay the votes. They're going to arrest people who are holding up three fingers. They've already thrown reporters in jail. Yay? Of course not. Nay. This is ridiculous. And I'm not going to put my stamp of approval on what's going on in Thailand right now. I'm not going to get behind any military junta that's doing anything of the sort and trying to crack down on peaceful political protest, even if it is foreign-funded, backed, insurgent political protest. I don't care. The idea of throwing people in jail or trying to break up political assemblies of more than 5 people is disgusting, and it is just tyranny. So I, for one, am not happy about what's happened in Thailand, even though the tyranny has been taken away. And it's just, I think, something to keep in mind for people who, again, are activists who are agitating for the overthrow of various tyrannies, we always have to be careful about what comes in to take its place, because if you don't get rid of the fundamental power structure, nothing really changes.
James, you reminded me even there as you were speaking. I do have other posts on my geopolitics site about the delay in 1 year in elections. And this, I forgot, this all kind of also kicked off with martial law in Thailand. Oh, let's take selfies. That's a whole other area, I think, worth looking into. And of course, we will include that in the show notes for this episode. James, our second story this week files under what we kind of jokingly refer to as the WTF kind of stories. The amazing stories that you see that you have to rub your eyes and click on the story and find out exactly what was going on. Vincent van Gogh's severed ear regrown and on display in Germany. I think Mashable.com sets the scene pretty well by noting that if you were from the future and came back to find the moment at which 3D printing got weird, we've arrived at that day. A German artist just 3D printed a replica of famous painter Vincent van Gogh's ear using DNA from the great-great-grandson of Van Gogh's brother, Theo. The result is now on display at the Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, Germany. Welcome to 2014. Now, for fleshing out of the story, so to speak, from the Daily Caller, the ZKM Museum in Germany has recently regrown Vincent van Gogh's ear and is now displaying the ear to visitors. The Guardian also reports, according to the museum's website, quote, "The ear is grown from tissue-engineered cartilage and is identical in shape to Van Gogh's ear by using computer imaging technology. Additionally, the ear functions as would a normal living ear. You can talk to the ear. The input sound is processed by a computer using software that converts it to stimulate nerve impulses in real time." The background, of course, Van Gogh, famous for his 19th century post-impressionist paintings like The Night Cafe and Starry Night. He may have gained even more greater fame for cutting off his own right ear. Why he did it has always been up for debate. Some say it was in a fight. Some say he was losing his mind. Nevertheless, Van Gogh and the story of his severed ear has lived on, creating fame that may supersede his own artistic talent, and now the ear itself will live on for all to see. James, WTF.
Fleshing out the story, indeed. You worked on that one, didn't you? All right. Well, yeah, WTF is definitely the reaction to this story. It's interesting. I mean, here we are in sci-fi Buck Rogers fantasy land, so we are living the future, and it's I mean, it's an interesting little story. Not really of much significance in and of itself, but again, as people know, I'm excited about 3D printing technology and the power that it brings to bring the manufacturing process down to the level of the individual. Star Trek replicators sitting there on our desktop in the near future. I mean, it's a fascinating and powerful idea, a revolutionary idea that has the potential to cut out the middlemen so that we can share through this open source revolution the tools and the knowledge for creating what we need for ourselves without having to rely on the middleman and this ridiculous structure that we've come up with in the Industrial Revolution Society. So I'm excited about that. I'm not particularly excited about replications of Van Gogh's missing ear, but hey, whatever draws attention to the phenomenon, I guess, might be for the good. But WTF, it's just one of those stories. It's kind of out of left field, or left ear, I guess.
And James, you said Star Trek, so I'll mention just a few other interesting, I think, kind of WTF stories, all of which submitted to us on Twitter by @FuturesCalling and @OverTheRye. Star Trek-style tractor beam created at Dundee University in Scotland. A new technique could erase painful memories or bring them back, thanks to UC San Diego School of Medicine and scientists at Netherlands Kavli Institute of Nanoscience teleport quantum info across a room. That's, they moved information from one place to another without it traveling. These are the stories, again, James, that let us know. Welcome to the future. Welcome to 2014. And speaking of removing the middleman, James, and as you noted on Twitter, we'll move to our third and final story this week. As real net neutrality starts at home, German villagers build their own broadband network. Coming from the English language German publication, thelocal.de, too isolated and with few inhabitants, the tiny village of Lowenstedt in northern Germany is simply too small to show up on the radars of national internet operators. So the villagers took their digital fate into their own hands and built a broadband internet network of their own. Surrounded by wind power generators and fields around 30 kilometers or 18 miles from the Danish border, the picturesque brick houses and gardens of Lowenstedt, with its population of just 640 people, are spread over 200 hectares or 500 acres. With around 13.5 miles or 22 kilometers of network needed to link up all of those houses to a high-speed data highway, we would never have found a company willing to supply the necessary fiber optics, says Mayor Holger Jensen. So some 58 other communities in northern Friesland face similar difficulties, and so the idea was born of clubbing together businesses, individuals, villages to secure access to a modern technology that's taken for granted in most German towns and cities. Solidarity is high in a village like Lowenstedt, and 94% of households pledged to sign up to the network for 2 years before it was even built, which was part of getting this all built in the first place. And still being worked on. This is not finished yet. We're too small. Without this initiative, we would have been forgotten, said resident Peter Koch, who added that he feels reassured that his parents would be able to benefit from the advantages of telemedicine and other technological advances, allowing elderly people to continue living in their own homes. Mayor Jensen, again, notes living in the country with the luxuries of the town. He's also, James, the mayor is also a farmer who says the high-speed internet will enable him to take better care of his livestock. And there are other benefits. The presence of high-speed internet network could stem the exodus of young people, help keep companies in the region, support property prices, and make the region, which is close to the North Sea, much more attractive to tourists. James, this is definitely a good news next week kind of story.
What a beautiful story this is, and I take a lot of heart from this, because this is the answer to the people who say that, the only answer to the oligopoly of the media, telecoms, and those big corporations is government. That's the only way we can provide this type of service to the people. Of course it isn't. We don't have to rely on the corporations. We don't have to rely on the implied threat of violence of government with the gun to the heads of the population, forcing them to do what they don't want to do. What we can do is we can get people together to actually create the infrastructure that they want. It is possible. It is happening in various places around the world. And why isn't it happening in your community if it isn't happening? This is the key. And it's such an important lesson to learn. And it's one that's happening right now. I don't want this to be a pie in the sky thing that people think is somehow just, maybe that'll happen in a couple of isolated cases. It is happening even if you don't know about it. It's happening in Kansas City and other places around the United States, Kansas City Freedom Network and other places. I'll put in some links to some places where this is happening, where they're creating broadband networks for free use. And this relates back to what I said was the solution to internet censorship back a year or two ago on the podcast. I think it's the solution to the net neutrality debate that's happening right now. It's not what John Oliver is saying, that our big solution to all of this is to go to the FCC website and leave comments. Ooh, yay. I mean, yes, that will probably win this particular round of the debate, but it will not win the next or the next or the next or the 57th round of this debate. It is going to be won by the big corporations eventually if we allow the government to decide this instead of taking the action into our own hands. Once again, pirate internet, the mesh networking infrastructure is not only a pie in the sky idea, it already exists. Go to somewhere like Open Garden and download the Open Garden app, and boom, you're suddenly on a mesh network with 5 million other people that actually exists right now. So the technology for overcoming these problems is here. It is in the hands of the people. We have to stop giving up this attitude that the only thing we can do is appeal to the masters to give us a few more scraps from the table, and start rolling up our sleeves and doing the real work to create the alternative infrastructure.
So as long as we're talking about good news, we'll wrap up with a couple of hashtag good news next week submissions from GJ Salisbury, noting 2 different cities stopped fluoridation. That's Buffalo, Missouri, and Oberon, Australia. And Blue Lou Streak on Twitter noted that the Massachusetts Pirate Party has fielded their first two candidates. So, James, pirate parties and pirate internets, anything that breaks down the centralized control to me is good news next week.
Today we're talking to Julia Tourianski of bravetheworld.com, and for those of you who haven't checked out her website or her YouTube channel, I suggest you do so, and of course links will be in the show notes so that you can go and check that out for yourself. And while you're there, you should check out her latest video from Bilderberg 2014 in Copenhagen, where she had the very interesting chance to talk to a Bilderberg member for a full half-hour conversation. Very interesting little piece of video. So, Julia, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you. You have a good radio voice.
I've worked on it for many years. Well, let's get straight into it by talking a little bit about yourself. This might be the first time that some of the people out there have encountered you. So why don't we just talk about Brave the World and what this site is and what it is you do?
Yeah, well, it's mostly my YouTube channel that I concentrate on, and the site has some extra content if anyone's interested to explore. But I basically promote anti-state mentality, and I guess by definition, I am an individualist anarchist. And everything that I do, not everything, but a lot of the content I produce kind of resonates with that lifestyle or that philosophy. Yeah, so Bilderberg is naturally, this grouping of power and think tanks and royalty and politics and business and all these people that influence our day-to-day life in a very significant way, everything that I'm against, basically. So it was natural for me to go and protest, I guess, or check it out, or, make them nervous or have them come out and gauge us like Mr. Diederik did.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about this. So I won't set it up too much, but basically Diederik Samsom is the parliamentary leader there in the Netherlands and was a former Greenpeace Netherlands activist who got interested in politics. An interesting character in his own right. But let's talk about the conversation. How did this come about? Because the video starts very abruptly. So what was the setup to this?
Yeah, so a day or two before, my battery died, and I was walking back to my hotel room to recharge it, and he had come out to talk to the protesters, and that time was actually really interesting because we were like caged off. There's all these barricades and double fence, and he was like talking to the little people through the fence, and I happened to be on his side of the fence. I'm the only one there, and I didn't have a camera screen film it, and he just, they were asking him about assortment of things, and then someone brought up how this is a secret meeting and blah blah blah, and he's like, it's not secret. I'm like, why are you signing non-disclosure agreements? It's like all I had to yell, and he like tried to ignore me a bit. Anyways, at that point it felt very unnerving to me. Like, I didn't like just seeing this Bilderberger talking to the people here, protesting them through a fenced gate. It really upset me. So I just left to go get my battery, because I couldn't even film it anyways. I didn't, and he had finished the conversation shortly after. So then that was an opportunity missed in my mind. And then 2 days later, I was walking with Paul Joseph Watson out of the Freedom Pen to go back to the kind of the side areas where we were taking pictures. And I'm like seeing this guy walk towards us. I'm like, oh my God, that's Diederik Samsom. That's the guy that I didn't get to talk to last time. I didn't on my camera. And then Paul whips out his phone and would put on my camera. I'm like, Mr. Samsom, what are you doing? And then he was actually on his way into the pen this time. So I guess maybe he didn't like the barrier between the protesters, because as a politician, you have to try and interact with the people on the same level. It's a tactic. So he went in to talk to us directly in the Freedom Pen, and that's how we caught him. So we had the opportunity to talk to him on the way, and then by the end of it, there was a whole crowd around him.
Well, you're right. I mean, there's definitely the politician of sort of political air about him, and he definitely carried himself that way. And it was interesting to... Sorry, it was.
Pretty much so, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting to watch the dynamic of the conversation and how it unfolds, because I don't know about yourself, but when I was watching it, at first it seems like, oh, this is just going to be 2 minutes. He's going to answer a couple questions and then get away. But he continues to engage with you and the people around you for half an hour. It's quite a lengthy conversation. And I noticed in the comments on your YouTube channel, a lot of the people are saying, well, he seems like a nice guy, which is a pretty amazing thing for people who presumably are following your channel because they're fellow anarchists who despise the Bilderberg and what it stands for as well. So he certainly does have that political air about him, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's definitely trained. He's a politician. He was from a different kind of field, and he deliberately made the choice to go into politics. There must be reasons behind that, and I think he saw this as a practice, a chance to practice, and to, especially after all the kind of more right-wing voting results all over Europe, in France and UKIP winning in England. I think this is and him being on the left, I think this was a chance for him to kind of understand where we're coming from and see how he can, manipulate I'm just imposing my assumptions on it, but I have a healthy distrust for anyone who goes into politics, and the way that he carried himself, he's definitely well trained, and he can definitely avoid certain questions or answer certain questions in a way that is very roundabout. And the most interesting part I thought was he kept on about democracy and voting and how we can change things. And then we brought up fluoride in the water and how nobody voted for that. Nobody had a say. It was decided for. I don't even care if you believe that it's bad or good. Let's say it's the best thing ever for us. We did not have a choice in putting it in our water. So, and then at that point, what does he say? He says, well, sometimes you have to vote things out that are already implemented. And I'm like, and that's democracy? That's democracy? Voting out something that's imposed on you already and struggling to get something that you never wanted in the first place? That's not democracy. I don't even like democracy, but that's not even a pure form of democracy that he's, supposedly trying to get, so the power to the people, vote people out, put politicians in jail if you don't like it. If you don't like this, you can change it. But that's not what we have, it's what we've never had. And he obviously doesn't actually want that because he's okay with imposing laws before they're voted on.
Exactly right. Well, that's just the clearest indication that we have that democracy is nothing but a feel-good buzzword that politicians like to throw around because they know most people will just swallow it whole. But yeah, no, I noticed that point. I also noticed, interestingly enough, he talked about Peter Thiel's presence there, and of course, this is the PayPal co-founder / Facebook early investor, libertarian millionaire who does a lot of investment in capital ventures there in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And he was talking about sort of the libertarian ideas being propounded by Peter Thiel in Bilderberg, the Bilderberg meeting itself. What was your take on that little exchange?
Well, he said, right, he didn't agree with him, and he's this, no taxes, no anything. I guess I don't know how much of he had with Peter Thiel, I don't know that. It seemed like he had a bit of an encounter with him, but it also seemed like it could have been just him knowing what Peter Thiel stands for in the media and kind of regurgitating that. And Peter is an interesting guy. I'm hoping to write an article about this. I have some good pictures of him from Bilderberg that we got. But it seems like, well, this is my friend Amir Taki actually put it like this. He's doing something with his right hand, but he's doing something else with his left hand, like investing in Plantier Technologies, which is quite sketchy for somebody who believes in freedom and the libertarian principles of privacy, non-aggression. Like, this is just the general consensus from our kind of movement, and if he subscribes to that, investing in a company like that is a bit weird. And I just don't know. I don't know. But he went to Bilderberg. He was invited. So why was he invited? So that they could understand Bitcoin better, or get a different perspective, or do they do that? It's odd. I mean, and even if he is, like, if you want, on our side, I don't really believe their sides, but if he's on our side and he means well, I don't expect him to say no to invitation. Maybe what's it all about? Maybe he'll be talking about his experience. But I kind of doubt
You never
that.
know, but I believe this is his second or maybe his third appearance at Bilderberg, so I think he's one of the gang at this point. And I would echo what you're saying there, and in fact point out that his PayPal co-founder, whose name I forget, Max something or other, was the one who said on Charlie Rose's program several years ago that he loved the NSA and he wished he could work for them. So, and you know, hey, maybe they are with Palantir and PayPal and all of the things that they're involved with. So I certainly have my reservations about Peter Thiel and whether he's a sort of false flag meme that's been inserted in there to make libertarians look bad. But at any rate, we'll find out more about what sort of develops out of that, if anything. But let's talk about some of the other things that you mentioned there with Diederik. For example, global warming did come up as an issue, and I thought, interestingly enough, he did point out, well, if global warming's a problem, we need a global solution for it. And how can you do that with anarchy?
Did you like his Freudian slip there with the world order? I loved that. Yes. I jumped all over that. Yeah, it was, you know, the people have to vote. The people have to vote. But at the end of the day, you know, we have to decide what's best for the people with a global solution because, you know, no one's going to agree on anything. So we should just decide for you. That's exactly what it is, right? But he was very surprised with us not being fully on board with man-made global warming. And, I mean, being from Greenpeace, that's natural, I think. And course, yeah. I think he thought that maybe... He kept bringing up Greenpeace, and he thought we'd be like buddy-buddy with him over it, because I think the consensus from them is that we're all pot-smoking hippies, you know, that just... But we're, you know, it goes deeper than that. Most of us don't like Greenpeace there. I've met, I forget his name, but he's one of the co-founders of Greenpeace. He was the grassroots Greenpeace dude. And he came to Mises Canada in Toronto and did a talk on how their anti-GMO campaigns, you know, kill children all over the world because of carotene deficiency. So he's very now anti-Greenpeace, even though he helped found it and develop it. So it's that organization isn't black and white like he thinks that we think it is. So I think he was very surprised and kind of disappointed in that because I think that was kind of a commonality he hoped to have with us. But
the best part is when you had the little vote on whether or not man-made global warming exists, and democracy proved that it didn't.
So in our little freedom pen, you know, we made a change, made a difference, didn't we? Yay! Hooray!
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that again speaks to the fundamental issue, which is what is political power and how is it wielded, and it is not wielded through votes, and it never has been and never will be. So I mean, again, this is a fascinating conversation, and I noticed that your video only has 4,400 views so far. So everyone who's watching this video should definitely go out and check it out. And of course, I'll put the link in the show notes so you can go and watch it for yourselves. And again, a half-hour conversation, very interesting. You got into a lot of different points with him.
It's a good discourse, I thought. Yeah,
exactly right. And I noticed at a few points that you brought up talking points like talking about a republic and things like that versus democracy. And I know that's not exactly what you believe politically speaking, but you were talking in the context of the conversation. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I was, you know, everyone goes through a transition. I don't know anyone who just becomes an anarchist outright. I was, you know, into the Republic for a long time. And I would, you know, that could either be a stepping, you know, that could be a stepping stone, or I don't like to hypothesize about that because usually revolution comes like everything just gets destroyed and then, you know, you start from scratch. So it probably won't be a stepping stone, but it is a good conversational stepping stone because, okay, if you were there were a lot of, you know, people that kind of, they bring up subjects that were not helpful to the conversation. So he would, you know, engage those people and defeat them really fast instead of having a conversation with someone, you know, with a good background knowledge and who can actually engage him.
But before I let you go, I have to ask the one question. Why brave the world? I don't even understand what that means.
No? Okay, well, it's a play on words from Brave New World. So instead of subscribing to this brave new world that we live in, it's brave the world. So go on and brave the world, or brave the world. It's just another way of saying be brave and don't, you know, don't settle for what we have, and make your own change and make your own life and subscribe to your own ideas.
Fair enough. Well, it's a respectable ideology and memorable. I think I can remember that. So bravetheworld.com, and hopefully we can have you on again in the future to talk more about anarchy. So thank you.
This was really good.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Take care.
1913, corrupting the system, devalue dollar, hyperinflation, the fatal reason, controlled by Lucifer. He can see you lying in your eye. You know in high from Judge Jesus Christ. Hallelujah. No